When oil spikes, most people look at one number, the price at the pump. But that misses the real story. Because a barrel of oil is not just gasoline. It is diesel for trucks, jet fuel for planes, heating fuels, road materials, lubricants, and petrochemical feedstocks that end up inside packaging, synthetic fibers, auto parts, detergents, medical supplies, and thousands of everyday products. That is why an oil shock does not stay in the energy sector. It spreads. And this is not a hypothetical. On February 27, U.S. crude was around $67 a barrel. By March 13, WTI settled at $98.71, as the war-linked disruption around Iran and the Strait of Hormuz pushed a fresh risk premium into global energy markets. Brent settled that same day at $103.14. So let's start with the barrel itself. A standard U.S. barrel contains 42 gallons of crude oil, but U.S. refineries turn that into about 45 gallons of petroleum products because of processing gain. The EIA says one barrel typically yields about 19 to 20 gallons of motor gasoline and about 11 to 12 gallons of distillate fuel oil, most of which becomes diesel and heating oil. Add jet fuel and smaller fuel streams and the barrel is overwhelmingly a fuel barrel. A practical visual breakdown for this video is roughly 45% to 48% gasoline, 26% to 29% distillates, around 10% jet fuel, and the remaining slice split across LPGs, asphalt, lubricants, petrochemical feedstocks, petroleum coke, and other refined products. That matters because it tells you where the first inflation blast lands. It lands in gasoline, it lands in diesel, it lands in jet fuel. And those are not niche inputs. In the U.S. consumption mix, petroleum is still dominated by transportation fuels. EIA says about 44% of petroleum consumption in 2023 was motor gasoline, 19% was distillate fuel, and 8% was jet fuel. So when crude jumps, the biggest and fastest pass-through is still fuel. Now here's where the inflation plumbing begins. The largest component of a gallon of retail gasoline is crude oil itself. EIA puts crude's share of the retail gasoline price at 52.3% on average over 2014 to 2023. For diesel, crude accounted for 45.6% on average over that same span. So if crude rises nearly 47%, you do not get a one-for-one move at the pump, but you do get a large pass-through. And that is already showing up. AAA's national average regular gasoline price was $2.98 on February 26 and $3.6775 on March 14, up about 23%. EIA's weekly national diesel average was $3.809 for the week of February 23 and $4.859 for the week of March 9, up about 28%. That is the first order inflation hit, visible consumer pain in gasoline, and a quieter but broader tax through diesel. Diesel matters because diesel moves the real economy. It powers long-haul trucking, farm equipment, construction equipment, parts of rail logistics, warehousing, and backup industrial systems. So once diesel rises, transportation surcharges rise, shipping costs rise, and the delivered price of physical goods starts climbing. That is how an oil shock reaches the supermarket shelf without needing every product to be made directly from petroleum. Then there is the non-fuel channel. Oil is also feedstock. Petroleum products go into asphalt, road oil, lubricants, greases, waxes, solvents, plastics, synthetic fibers, synthetic rubber, coatings, adhesives, and a long list of household and medical items. The Department of Energy's product list runs from shampoo bottles and trash bags to artificial limbs, antiseptics, dashboards, keyboards, and packaging materials. So when crude stays elevated, it raises not just energy bills, but parts of the materials bill behind modern manufacturing. So what does this mean for inflation? Start with the direct CPI math. In the February 2026 CPI basket, gasoline carried a relative importance of 2.812%, fuel oil 0.079%, and all energy 6.325%. If you apply crude's 52.3% share to a move from roughly $67 to $98, that implies a gasoline price effect in the neighborhood of about 24% if pass-through is broad. Multiply that by gasoline's CPI weight, and gasoline alone can add roughly 0.7 percentage point to headline CPI. Fuel oil is much smaller in the basket, so its direct effect is far smaller. That gives us a useful floor. From there, the broader estimate depends on second-round effects through diesel, air freight, petrochemicals, packaging, and inflation expectations. Federal Reserve research says the 2022 energy shock moved U.S. headline inflation noticeably, but had only modest effects on U.S. core inflation and GDP. Dallas Fed work similarly finds energy shocks can explain a meaningful share of headline inflation volatility, while contributing much less to core inflation than many people assume. And Fed-cited international evidence finds a 10% rise in crude oil can raise headline inflation by about 0.4 percentage point on impact, though those estimates are cross-country averages, not a clean U.S. one-for-one rule. So the clean on-screen estimate for this episode is, if WTI moves from about $67 to about $98 and stays elevated long enough to pass through, a reasonable rough estimate is plus 0.7 to plus 1.2 percentage points on headline CPI and about plus 0.1 to plus 0.4 percentage points on core CPI, with the direct fuel hit showing up faster than the non-fuel spillover. That is an inference from current CPI weights, EIA fuel price composition, and the Fed and Dallas Fed research base, not an official government forecast. And you can already see markets wrestling with that logic. The 2-year Treasury yield was 3.76% on March 12, and the 10-year was 4.27%, while Reuters reported that investors had been trimming rate cut expectations as oil surged and inflation risks rose. That suggests markets are not pricing a permanent 1970s-style inflation regime, but they are pricing fewer and later Fed cuts, plus some extra term premium and war risk premium in longer yields. So the takeaway is simple. A barrel of oil is still mostly a fuel barrel. That means the first hit from higher crude is gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. But the second hit is slower and wider: freight, chemicals, plastics, packaging, and manufactured goods. That is why oil shocks feel like they start at the gas station, but end up in the CPI basket, bond market, and eventually equity valuations too. Oil is not just one commodity. It is the input cost with tentacles.